He's coming out right now to start talking to the audience. And of course, what he will say is his own version of what's happened in the courtroom, because we know there's no cameras there. But you can believe he's going to talk a great deal about how he feels about all of this.
The gag order is totally unconstitutional. Can't even allow articles to be put in. As an example, these are articles that were over the last day and a half. They're very good articles. They say the case is a sham and it shouldn't even be tried. It shouldn't have been submitted. And I don't even know if you're allowed to put them in. We have a gag order, which to me is totally unconstitutional. I'm not allowed to talk, but people are allowed to talk about me. So they can talk about me, they can say whatever they want, they can lie, but I'm not allowed to say anything. I just have to sit back and look at why a conflicted judge has ordered me to have a gag order. I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like this. I'd love to talk to you people. I'd love to say everything that's on my mind, but I'm restricted because I have a gag order. And I'm not sure that anybody's ever seen anything like this before. And even having to do with articles, somebody writes an article. If I read every one of these articles incomplete, I read some of it and I'll look at headlines, all good headlines, and the case is a sham. But I can't read the whole thing. I'd be reading, this is like reading a novel. So I put an article in and then somebody's name is mentioned somewhere deep in the article and I end up in violation of a gag order. I think it's a disgrace. It's totally unconstitutional. I don't believe it's never, not to this extent, ever happened before. I'm not allowed to defend myself, and yet other people are allowed to say whatever they want about me. Very, very unfair. Having to do with the schools and the closings, that's Biden's fault. And by the way, this trial is all Biden. You know, this is all Biden, just in case anybody has any question. And they're keeping me in a courtroom that's freezing, by the way, in a courtroom all day long. Well, he's out campaigning. That's probably an advantage because he can't campaign. Nobody knows what he's doing. He can't put two sentences together. But he's out campaigning. He's out campaigning, and I'm here in a courtroom, sitting here, sitting up as straight as I can all day long, because you know what? It's a very unfair situation. So we're locked up in a courtroom, and this guy's out there campaigning, if you call it a campaign. Every time he opens his mouth, he gets himself into trouble. So that's the story. I have an unconstitutional gag order by a highly conflicted judge that should recuse himself. Very simple. On the schools, should have never happened. What's going on in this country now should have never happened. But of course, the Ukraine war would have never happened. The Israeli attack would have never happened. Inflation would have never happened. We have the worst president in the history of our country, and he's the one that has us in all these different lawsuits. Thank you very much.
And you are hearing from Donald Trump there. He just emerged from the courtroom after listening to David Pecker, the tabloid king of the National Enquirer, testify at length about efforts that they took to suppress negative stories about Donald Trump as he was running for the White House. Trump came out there and noticed he was speaking to the camera, speaking to the media. He says that his gag order that is in place violates him from doing that and from defending himself. It doesn't. It does prevent him, though, from going after witnesses in this case, including Michael Cohen and people like David Pecker and others who are expected to take that stand. He was armed with a stack of papers. He said that they are positive articles that he wanted to enter into the record. And Daniel Dale is here with us, was listening to all of that statement, CNN's resident fact checker. And Daniel Dale, you know, aside from what Trump is trying to enter into the evidence, it's not clear that his attorneys wanted to enter that into the evidence. Can you just walk us through what he said about the gag order here and what's true and what's not true?
Yeah, Caitlin, he perpetually makes the gag order sound like it gags him more than it actually does. So I don't know what was in those specific articles, but he said he had an article saying this case is a sham. It shouldn't have been brought, and he's not sure if he could even say that. Well, he can say that. That is clearly not prohibited by the gag order. I have the text of the gag order in front of me. What it does, Caitlin, is bar him from three specific kinds of speech. Number one is speaking publicly or directing others to speak publicly about known or reasonably foreseeable witnesses in the case, specifically about their potential participation in the case. Number two is speaking publicly, directing others to speak publicly about prosecutors other than DA Bragg staff members in Bragg's office and the court and the family members of prosecutors, staff members of the court. And it qualifies that if those statements are made with the intent to materially interfere with the case. And then number 3, he's barred from speaking publicly about or directing others to speak publicly about jurors or prospective jurors. So if he just wants to say this case is a sham, as he has pretty much every time he's appeared before those cameras, he's perfectly allowed to. He's not barred. And I'll just add, Caitlin, I've heard you fact check this, others on our team fact check this. He said this case is all Biden. There is precisely zero evidence that President Biden had anything to do with bringing, orchestrating, running this case. So he says that pretty much every time. It's completely out of thin air.
As Lanny Davis, who was Michael Cohen's attorney and is now his legal advisor, was just pointing out to me last night, it was prosecutors who worked for the Trump Justice Department when Bill Barr was the attorney general that were the ones who were asking questions about Michael Cohen and these payments and where they went. Daniel Dale, great to have you. Thank you for fact checking that Trump statement for us. My panel is back here with me. And Paula and Phil, obviously Trump's coming out and he can't talk about David Pecker individually and go after what he just listened to for several hours, him on the witness stand, and clearly that's bothering him.
Yeah, I was surprised that he started with the gag order. Clearly that hearing did not go well for his attorneys earlier today, but he repeated some of the arguments that they either made in court or had hoped to make before it went off the rails, arguing that this is unconstitutional. Defendants are routinely subject to gag orders if it is necessary, but Trump's argument is that because he's a candidate for the presidency, that anything he says or most of the things he says are political speech and enjoy a heightened protection. Now, this is an argument he and his team have used creatively in other criminal cases and have just not been successful. I don't think that's an argument that's going to carry the day, but that is the point that he's making there. He believes that a gag order on a presidential candidate is unconstitutional, but this is unprecedented to have a candidate for the White House as a criminal defendant. We've never been here before. Also, once again, taking aim at the judge, suggesting that he is conflicted because his daughter works for a company that does fundraising for Democrats. Now, the daughter is covered by the gag order. The judge is not.
I mean, is there any greater irony than complaining about a gag order and saying it restricts you from speaking while you're speaking to cameras and media who's in the hallway?
You know, he's pushed the bounds on great ironies over the course of the last several years, 8 or 9 years, but this is definitely high up there. I don't think there's any question
Definitely
about
registers.
that. Also, the idea of, you know, for somebody who wasn't campaigning a lot heading into this trial, maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks, making very clear that he would have been campaigning on a very regular basis, that he not had to be involved in this trial, even though he voluntarily had gone to courthouses repeatedly over the course of the last several months and made that a central part of his campaign as well. And there's no indication that either from a financial perspective or from a political perspective they had grand plans to be traveling a lot. It is very clear he's cold. He has made that point several times.
So have reporters, to be fair, in the room.
Yes, that is very clear. But I also think that what that statement underscores is that this is a complicated moment where he is not in control, as I think you guys have talked about repeatedly, both on the political side and the legal side. And over a course of a day, that can be pretty frustrating.